Hey there, it's Shireen Vishmaya coming to you from Kerala, India, and very excited to invite you to an upcoming class I'll be teaching on narcissism on May 8th, so a week from this Friday. I hope you'll join me. I think it's probably the most important class I've ever taught. I'm pouring my heart and soul into this one. I'm going to be sharing a lot of my personal journey with you and how my own recovery from a narcissistically abusive relationship led me on to my spiritual path, and how it was a spiritual initiation and how it really is the deepest shadow work. I just want to say that too. It really does bring up our deepest confrontation with the shadow. So I'm going to be breaking all of that down and giving you some interesting case studies as well. And my goal with this class is to really help. I mean, the response I've had from women who have suffered in these relationships has been overwhelming since I first put out the call and to ask for stories and people's charts and just, my studies and my research on this. When I've reached out to ask for what people need and want from this class, I've just never had such a moving response. So I know this class is needed, it's necessary, and it's going to be just the beginning of a much bigger project I want to do with this, starting on Venus retrograde, which is May 13th. So I am going to, after the class, be pouring even more of my my energy into a 40-day alchemical journey into this archetype with the animus dialogue. So we're going to talk about how narcissism is really connected to our inner dialogue, our inner masculine and feminine energies, and how we can untangle some of the shadow work to see why we might attract these types of partnerships or these relationships, or maybe you've had some history with narcissistic parents or siblings, friends, coworkers, bosses, or all of the above. Usually it's not just one, it's usually an amalgam of repeated patterns, and we can understand maybe how our relationship to the self, to the persona, to our own childhood wounding contributes to this pattern. I call it the rinse repeat pattern, so there's the classic narcissistic relationship pattern of love bombing and idealization to devaluation and breaking down the self-esteem, and then the discard, and then what they call the hoovering, where the narcissist will stalk you to try to get you back, and then of course the whole cycle repeats again. And most people that I've spoken to, and myself included, it's not just one cycle. You go through many cycles until you finally get it and you finally break it, but each cycle you learn more. You get first it breaks you down, but then you really see where there was a wound. I mean, you wouldn't go through this unless there was a shadow knocking at the door. I had a very powerful dream at the beginning or the onset of my this relationship that really turned me upside down and was a spiritual initiation. And the dream was that there was this innocent little boy that came to my door. This is when I was still living in New York City, and that's actually when my relationship started in 2012. And this little boy was at the door, and I saw this very vulnerable, wounded little boy. So I opened the door, and right behind this little boy was a killer, an old man killer, who's the shadow, who's the narcissist, and he tore me limb by limb. And it was a horrifying dream, and it was a precursor. It was right when I was about to start this relationship, but I didn't know what that meant until I was living it, until I was living through the relationship. And I'll share more. I had a lot of very obvious red flags coming from my own unconscious about what I was entering into. But even if all your friends, all your mentors, all your guides tell you to get out, it's something we have to go through, I think, ourselves. I mean, I wasn't stupid. I had a really strong life. I was a psychoanalyst already, and I thought I had healthy self-esteem at that time in my life. I was, really at kind of the top of my life, although I had just gone through a pretty emotional divorce. So I was in a vulnerable place when this happened. And so we'll talk about that too, how often narcissists will prey upon you when you're in a vulnerable place in your life. They can feel it. Any predators, they feel when you're weak, and they will wait for those opportunities. They're not going to go for someone really strong. But they also look for people who have power in a way but are at a weak point, because narcissists want to be associated with someone who has a high status, but they will wait for you to be in a weak moment so they can prey on you and work on you. And we'll talk more about that, but please let me know if you have any questions. We'll do a Q&A at the end of the class too, so anything that isn't covered in the topics you'll get a chance to ask about, or we'll go deeper into. And like I said, this is just the beginning of a much deeper dive I want to do on this theme, because I think it's really going to support all the healing going on the planet. And if we don't do this work with the shadow, we're headed for extinction, clearly. So it's never been a more important time to do this work, and I really hope you'll join me. And please feel free to DM me with any questions you have about the class.